Okay, today in photography we are going to learn about shutter speed. So what is the shutter speed? So in other words, it's the length of time that you open the shutter to allow the light to go in. So in other words, it's how long you're taking a picture for. If you want to control the shutter speed, that's probably because you're taking an action shot. And action shots are where subjects are moving in your photo. What does controlling the shutter speed do? So in this example, if you're looking at the three photos, we can tell that as we increase the shutter speed, which means I'm taking a faster photo, my moving subject is becoming frozen and clearer. But sometimes it gives a really cool effect to have a slower shutter speed. That means right now that my shutter speed is slower than the object is moving, and so I'm getting this blurred effect. And I have a choice if I want to do that or not, depending on the effect that I'm looking for. Here's another example of a time where you can play with shutter speed depending on the effect that you're looking for. So here, a picture on the right is the same image as the picture on the left, is just taking the photo over a longer exposure, so it's a slower shutter speed than the picture on the left. Now in both of those photos, the shutter speed is slower than my moving object because in both of them they're blurred. Just the one on the right is blurred more. And finally, here's another example. Okay, 1 second photo. We've got a 1/60th of a second photo and 1/1000th of a second photo. And notice how different the effect is in each one. So there are three different kinds of action shots. The first one is called a freeze shot. Freeze shot means that when you're taking a photo, your shutter speed is going to be faster than your moving subject. And this will allow you to have your moving subject be frozen in time. Looks like they're completely still. They're in midair, like the frog is there, and every part of them is perfectly focused. A second type of action shot is called a blurred shot. Blurred shots, you will need to use a tripod for this, so try not to forget that. It means that your shutter speed is actually going to be slower than the speed that your subject is moving. And we sometimes are looking for a blurred shot to get some special effects. So notice how interesting both of the images here are because we've slowed down our shutter speed. We don't want to make it an accident. And what's really important for a successful blurred shot is that the parts of the image that aren't moving have to be perfectly focused. So you definitely need a tripod. The final type of action shot is a pan shot. In this case, the subject is moving. It also is in perfect focus, but the background is streaked in the direction of the motion of your subject. So in both of these examples, the background is streaked from left to right. To get this sort of effect, while you're taking the photo, you actually have to physically move the camera in the same direction that your subject is moving. These are pretty difficult images to do. Your shutter speed would have to be probably slower, a little bit slower than your moving subject, and again, you're moving the camera to get this effect. So how do you set the shutter speed? So first, if you are using a Canon camera, you want to set your mode dial to TV. TV is shutter priority mode. And for Nikon, you want to set your mode dial to S. Then you're going to locate your main dial. So again, this is your main dial on your camera here. And on your LCD monitor of your camera, you are going to see which part you are in control of. So right now we've got a Canon here. It says we're in control of TV. That's your shutter speed. Next to it right now, what I'm hovering over is 1/125th of a second. So this is my shutter speed. And when you turn your your main dial, this is what you are effectively going to be changing, is the shutter speed. So How to decide what shutter speed you want to set it to is a little bit tricky because it's hard to tell how fast your subject is moving. But as a good rule of thumb, if you're trying to take a freeze shot, definitely you need to be faster than 1/60th of a second. I recommend even faster than that, but it all depends on what you're trying to take a photo of. A blurred image is going to be less than 1/60th of a second, and you are going to need to stabilize your camera. So either it's going to be on a tripod or you're going to stabilize it on a table. And for a pan shot, these ones are difficult. Again, it all depends on the amount of light, but I think a good starting point is about 1/20th of a second. This is the only time where you're not going to need a tripod even though you are under 1/60th of a second, because you actually have to move the camera with your moving subject. So as a warning, and do not forget this, make sure that when you set your shutter speed that your f-stop is not blinking. Your camera will choose the optimal aperture size for you to have a perfectly exposed image. However, there is a limit to the aperture that your camera can choose, and if it cannot find an ideal aperture, it's going to blink, and that's the camera's way of saying this isn't going to work. The camera is going to be, or the photo is going to be over or underexposed, so you're going to have to change something. And finally, always use a tripod if your shutter speed is slower than 1/60th of a second. So I'm going to ask you a few questions now about the following images to see how well you have understood these concepts. If you're finding it difficult to answer, I strongly recommend that you watch the video again.